Hey guys, how you doing? It's Chrisan. Today we're going to be talking about something that can exponentially help you put yourself in a better position for success. And it's really about habit forming, specifically how habit forming is a superpower. So many people think that you need to be at the right time, the right place when it comes to success. And although that is definitely true when it comes to aiding in it, the way to get to the circumstances where it develops that type of thing, where you are in the right position, is through your habits. See, your thoughts develop your habits, and your habits affect your circumstances. In fact, it's directly related to whatever it is that you think about. I think that if you play a lot of basketball is a habit. I think that if you party a lot, partying is a habit. There are good habits and bad habits, and there's such a scientific breakdown of how important it is towards success. And basically, the person who's most disciplined is the highest chance of success. That's really the way that it works. It's just going to be a matter of time. So, let's start talking about what habits are, how they form, and what it is that you can do to utilize them in order to make sure that you do become successful, if it's important to you. So the first thing is, whenever a habit forms, there's a cycle, and it's a consistent repeat cycle. So it's cue, routine, reward. Cue, routine, reward. And it's that every single time. So let's just run through a scenario. Let's pretend that every single time someone sends you a message. Someone sends you a message. Okay, and then when you send them, that's the cue. Someone sends you a message. Now the routine is that you reply to them. You send, my day was great. Now the reward is the feeling that you get from that communication. And so it's consistent. And if you reward yourself, that's how a habit forms. Let's talk about bad ones, right? Let's say every single time you're with your friend, he offers you alcohol. Every single time you're with him, you drink it. That's the routine. And the reward is that it feels good. It takes you away from whatever stress that you had, so you consistently do it. And so on and so on and so on. Now the worst thing about this is that bad habits form. So whenever you set up a bad habit, it's consistent. It's literally whatever you do is a habit. Whether you get up the time that you get up or the time that you don't get up, what you do throughout the day, whether it's productive or not. And the unfortunate thing is that they do form no matter what. The way that habits forms is because the human mind, it wants to be fast, effective, and efficient. It doesn't want to have to think whenever it's developing something. There's a reason why your first shot at basketball is really wonky, but then your thousands or 10,000 ends up becoming really easy. You don't have to actually think about the form, but just where you're shooting, just where you're aiming. It's the same with other thing. I think that if you first get into riding a bike, the first time you do it, there's a lot of motor function that's involved. Your brain's starting to create these pathways in order to make sure that it doesn't have to think a lot. And that's why once you've learned how to ride a bike, you never forget it. Which brings me to my next point, is that you actually never forget habits. That's the reason why you relapse. If there's a bad habit and you try to replace it, the truth is that it's always going to be there. It's just going to be a little bit watered down to when it was. It's the same way with how skills work. If you went from playing soccer every single day and then all of a sudden you stopped for 5 years and you picked it up after 5 years' time, you're going to be a bit rusty, but eventually the habits and the motor neurofunctions and stuff like that are going to come back again. And that's how habits form, and that's how habits go away. Now, the biggest thing that people mistake is that when you replace a bad habit with another bad habit, unfortunately, you don't get rid of the first one. You just start creating two. For example, if you drink alcohol a lot and you're like, oh, I'm a heavy drinker, I'm officially an alcoholic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that with smoking. Now, all of a sudden, you'll just have two bad habits, because habits don't go away. The only thing you can do is occupy your time. So when you occupy your time, you have to choose. Are you going to look towards developing a good habit or a bad habit? And that's why the relapses happen, because no matter what, these neurofunctions, they don't go away. They just become watered down. It's the same reason why you never forget how to ride a bike. It's crazy how old you can get. You can be 20 years away, but you can still pick up how to ride a bike. And that's because that's just how the human nature works. It doesn't forget these neuro patterns, especially the ones that you create when you're growing. So it's really important to understand where it is that you're putting in time. So let's talk about how it comes to overcoming bad habits, developing new ones. So first of all, there's a fear that comes to whenever you're starting a new habit, because you recognize what it is. It's the reason why so many people have a New Year's resolution, they set them, and then basically they end up forgetting by the time March comes around. Well, that happens because discipline and willpower needs to overcome. See, that time spent at the gym is time that's taken away from a poor habit, most likely. Chances are it's either sleep, and sleep is a habit, don't get me wrong. It is a necessary habit, but sometimes we do abuse it, just like anything else. So you're either taken away from your sleep or another activity that takes you away from being a level of productive. So you don't like that, believe it or not. It's not fun. Whenever you're creating a good habits, chances are that the reward is very minimal, right? So that's just the way that it works. So once that reward goes, the first workout, you might get a huge boost of endorphins. In fact, you should get a huge boost of endorphins. And the second one and the third one. But eventually it becomes mundane, just like anything else. Just like how you have to do more in order for it to stimulate the same way. So that's where willpower has to overcome it. Now the thing about willpower, or discipline that I like to call it, is willpower, or the difference between willpower and discipline, is that willpower is more like motivation. And the thing about motivation is it's awesome. It's a great thing to utilize to develop a habit and set up a routine, but the facts are is that it's going to subside. Motivation disappears. But that's where willpower or discipline needs to overcome. And just like any other habit, it's a habit in itself, which is really tough, and you're caught in a rock and a hard place if you don't have a lot of discipline. So the thing about willpower, let's talk about that. When you're developing it, it's a muscle. And just like a muscle, it can be developed. And just like a muscle, it can dwindle away. But on top of that, it does get fatigued throughout the day. So you have a limited amount of willpower every single day. Now, some people have extreme amounts. Some people have extreme amounts in the form of discipline. And that's what I'm trying to talk about. When willpower and motivation, they subside, see, they come and go. They come when you first start it, and they come when you develop success. But the only thing that's consistent is the routine and habit that you create for yourself. So what is it that you're going to do? What is it that you're going to put your time towards? If you master your thoughts and you master your habits, then success is just going to be an outcome. I think that if you drink a lot, right, then chances are you'll probably have a lot of friends who drink. That's another way that you can utilize to anchor your environment in order to help develop or break bad habits. So let's talk about drinking. It's a really simple one because a lot of people do drink at some point, drink alcohol. Well, let's say you're an abuser and you're a person who does drink too much. The first thing is that you have to admit that you have a problem. Addiction is really synonymous with just a bad habit. So the same way you break a bad habit is the same way that you develop a new one. So, the same way that you break an addiction is the same way that you break a bad habit. So first of all is admitting that you need help. In fact, I talk about being utterly disgusted with yourself, and that is when you'll decide to create change. Jim Rohn, he says, only then, when you feel utterly disgusted with the situation that you're at, experience a level of trauma or a level of transcending thought, that you'll look towards developing a change. If you've ever heard stories of people who step out of the shower, they look in the mirror, and they're absolutely disgusted with their body type, and they decide that they need to look towards actively making a change. Well, there's a reason why that happens, and it's a reason why it's consistent, and the ones who do end up wanting to break a habit, from that standpoint, end up following through. It's because it's traumatic. So the first step is understanding and self-evaluation, accepting that you have a problem. Now, when you accept that you have a problem, you recognize that you need help. Now, there's two ways that you can go about needing help. You can use both of them or one or the other. The first one, it's completely dependent on your previous instilled disciplines. The first one is talking to someone. Getting around a new environment, someone who's already mastered it. That's probably the first step towards doing it. I reckon this is the easiest way to break your habit, but it's not also readily available. So it's talking to people who have broken their habit or people that can coach you through it. That's the number one easiest way in order to do it. Now the second one is by anchoring your environment. You cannot drink alcohol if alcohol doesn't exist anymore. So if you basically take it out of your living environment, whether it's not in your fridge, not in your cupboard, depending on the alcohol that you drink, by default, you've instilled an environment that supports the level of success. Now, I highly suggest you do both. Now, there's 12 steps to breaking your habit that you can definitely go into and understand, but the final step, which I think is really interesting, so the final step that people who do implement it has an incredibly high non-relapse rate, is that they take on someone else. They take on a level of mentorship. So if you've overcome, let's say, alcohol, and if you then coach someone to get through alcohol, it's almost as a level of accountability that you've brought between you and that person. And it's allowed you to continually lead into being that example. And it's an interesting, really phenomenon. And I think that the scientists relate it back towards that sort of herd mentality, how we naturally look for the recognition from others. So whenever you develop that level of accountability through someone else, you feel obligated to hold it up and make sure that you follow through. So that's something that I highly suggest people who are trying to overcome bad habits, especially ones that are extreme or are genuinely affecting their life negatively, is through mentoring someone else once they themselves conquer it to a certain extent. Now, how does this go about developing new ones? Well, you need to learn towards occupying your time. So if you can understand that cue, routine, reward, then it always talks about having that consistently and doing it. So they say about after 66 days, it takes to make it habit automatic. That means you don't need to think about what it is that you need to do anymore. I'm talking about if you run 66 days in a row, all of a sudden you don't need to think about the process. I've heard other ones, but I really like the whole 30 days to develop a habit, 90 days to create a lifestyle, which means that is you now. It's a part of you. It's not something, in order to break the habit, it's going to be just as hard to start because it's a part of you now. For example, every morning I wake up and I shower. That's just what I do. I've been doing it since I can remember. It would be very hard and I feel weird on a few days that I don't. For example, something might come up where I don't shower. And the chances are that you probably have a lot of habits that are like this, whether it's brushing teeth before you go to bed, watching a movie before you do sleep, things like that just feel out of routine whenever you do something that occupies that time. Well, that's the same level. So after 66 days, you develop that feeling. Now, the goal is to make those good habits. See, no matter what, your time is being spent on something. It's either going to be something that's productive towards your goal, meaning that drawing you closer to what it is that you're looking towards achieve, or it's distracting you from it. I talk about breaking it down to two categories, things that are urgent and important, and things that are unproductive. Now, you're either focused or you're distracted. So where are you spending your time? Well, first of all, you want to understand and discern the difference between things that are important and things that are urgent. So, a lot of people, it is a bit of conflicting things, but I talk about how importance are basically things that don't have deadlines. What's important? For example, spending time with your kids. If you have kids, spending time with your kids, developing them yourself is very important. However, things get in the way. For example, work, other commitments, things that are relative to deadlines and urgent tasks. Those get in the way. In fact, those generally trump important things. So some people say, get rid of the urgent, but I talk about putting deadlines on the important. Something like health, making sure that you work out, keep your heart rate up, eat right, that's really important. But the fact is that there's no real deadline on that. In fact, there never will be a deadline on your health. At some point, your accumulated habits across a period of time are going to have an effect on you, so it's making sure that you prioritize it early without the need of a deadline. So once you can basically utilize that, understand that your time, is it going to things that are urgent? For example, work, like jobs, generally those have urgent tasks, things that you have to be there on time, you have to get things done before the deadlines and stuff like that. Important things like spending time with your wife, spending time with your kids, spending time with your significant other, working on your health, fitness and stuff like that. But that's another thing in order to basically discern between those two. Now the other one is if it's things that are unproductive. So things that are unproductive. Now this is tough because so many people think or believe that you do need downtime. And you arguably might in terms of your situation, but the truth is that if you're incredibly obsessive with whatever it is that you're looking at to achieve, it's just a matter of time before you become successful. For example, Elon Musk used to sleep under his desk 5 hours, and then for the other 19, he'd be coding. When he was developing PayPal and SpaceX and all those types of different industries, literally 100% of the time that he was awake, it was either spent eating or working. And look at where he is now. So if you can develop that level of obsession in terms of a habit towards what it is that you're looking towards achieve, it's also just a matter of time before you develop a level of success. So you want to emulate these types of success habits to a certain degree in order to get even a fraction of those results. So what it is that you're looking to achieve? What is it that you're looking towards achieve out of life? Where is it that you're working at the moment? What business are you talking about? I know within my business, I talk about how any time that you can be spent talking to people, developing your team and expanding it, you should utilize. And any times that you can't, you should be spending about evaluating the day. This is for the people who are genuinely serious about making 7 figures or above. For people who are looking towards actually, developing a passive income they can retire on. I talk about you have to get obsessive with it. Every single incredibly successful person over a short period of life dedicated their entire time to their craft. Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, sports athletes from LeBron to Kobe. There was excessive long periods of time where they were dedicating their number one priority towards life was working on their craft, was working on their project, was developing their character or leading their team towards success. So if that's how they did it, then obviously you need to duplicate it in your degree. What is it that you're searching? If you're doing it in my field, I can tell you what the things that you need to do. If you want to make 6 figures, 7, I can tell you that this is what it's probably going to take in order to get there in a reasonable amount of time. Anything less than that is going to get less than that. So basically setting up these correct habits early, having the discipline in check, is going to make sure that you're actually on track towards becoming successful. And it's tough. That's the hardest thing about this whole thing, is that it's tough. I know what it's like. I've had a bunch of bad habits. I still do have a bad habits. I relapse from time to time, but I have people around me that hold me accountable, and I'm accountable to them to make sure that I don't relapse. So I highly suggest that whenever you do make these changes in your life, you figure out people who are doing it with you. Because there's nothing that makes it easier than having people that are around you who are supporting you and know exactly what you're going through, either because they've done it or they're going through it with you. That, in my opinion, is the easiest way to overcome habits. If you're living by yourself every single day and you set up the wrong ones, it's very difficult to break. I only know a few people who are able to still have the disciplines to not relapse and do the wrong things. It's not easy. It's tough. In fact, it's one of the hardest things possible. That's why I highly suggest you do 2 things. Connect with a group, connect with an upline, connect with a mentorship, connect with a bunch of people who are looking towards achieving the same thing or have conquered what you already have. They can know how to give you what it is that you're looking for, or they're going through it with you. Number 2, anchor your environment. Anchor your environment. Make sure you set up your lifestyle to what's surrounding you, that you're not tempted. I think that if you are an alcoholic, you're literally staying away from alcohol. No matter what, you won't have a choice. It's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really, really terrible. But you will succeed. No matter what, you will succeed. And it won't be long. It might be 5 years. It might be 2 years. But there will be a time where you will inevitably succeed through anchoring your environment. The next one is plugging into people. I'm telling you right now, mentorship. Easier to learn. How many people talked about learning from your mistakes? It's the number one thing that you should do, 100%. Learn from your mistakes. If you apply anything, evaluate and check. Even if it's not a mistake, even if you succeed, there's always things that you can do better. But the number one thing, the easiest way to become successful, following someone, learning from their mistakes before your own. There are so many blueprints towards success that you can implement and put into your life. 100%. Always out there. You don't need to be the first person to pioneer a new industry because there's already somebody doing it today. You can always be the second all the way up to before the last. As long as you're between the second and before the last, you're in an awesome spot in order towards becoming successful. The tough part is having the disciplines to implement the things that they were talking about, because this is how people apply in blueprints. Hey, this is what you need to do in order to be successful. Do this, 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 and this, and this. Make sure you apply it. Don't quit. Don't let up. People negotiate that. There is the exact task that you need to do in order to make sure that you're going to be successful, but they negotiate that. It all starts with your habits, because it's tough. It's tough. My opinion is that most people, unless they've been through a traumatic event, have a limited amount of bad habits they can break at any given point. Now, if you're going to break massive habits, you need to make massive changes in your environment. If you have a terrible living life that's forcing you to do things that are bad habits, the only way to break all of those habits at once is completely remove yourself from that environment. You are always going to be a product of your environment. If you hang out with 4 millionaires, you're going to be the 5th. If you hang out with 4 homeless people, you're going to be the 5th. I think that if you play basketball, you probably hang out with a lot of people who play basketball. I think that if you dance, I think you hang out with a lot of people who dance. I think that if you're successful in business, you hang out with a lot of successful people in business. It's not rocket science. In fact, it's really human nature. So if you want to create that environment for you, that's going to increase your chances of becoming successful. Because what it does is it anchors your habits and it anchors your environment towards basically becoming success. If you narrow yourself to the stage where literally you're enclosed, where the only thing you can go is marching towards the thing that you want to accomplish, eventually you're going to get there. It's tough and it's difficult to set up, but if you do it right, it's just a matter of time before you become successful. Finally, habit forming is that superpower. Everybody wants to know that shortcut towards becoming successful. The truth is, there is no shortcut. The shortcut is setting up the habits, because by habits it sets up routine, and by routine it's your lifestyle. You don't have a choice. No matter what, your culture is instilled in you in order to basically become successful. If you can do that, now effort is no longer a part of it. You don't have to question effort because it's just how you operate. I think it's really interesting if you ever look at the Spartan culture. Spartan culture instilled habits in their people that training was so much worse than actual warfare. Think about that for a second. Death, murdering, and everything like that, that was easier than training. So they instilled the habit that training was terrible. They'd forced them to go through so much crazy stuff in order to make sure that when it came to war, they were so much more above it. In fact, they enjoyed war. Because there wasn't the hectic deadlines. There wasn't the crazy training that they had to do. They didn't have to fend for food. Every village that they conquered or battle that they won, they were able to steal the enemies. And that was far easier than what they were having to accomplish in training, which is absurd. And if you can start, but the thing is, that's the consistent thing. If you can set up the habit of practice and making sure that you practice harder than your performance, then it's always going to be easy. Kobe Bryant always spoke about how he'd make practice was far harder than the game. Practice was so much more harder than the game. If you ever see any training videos, you can look them up online. He would give his teammates absolute hell, and when it came to the game, they'd perform. There's a reason why he's won 5 championships. It's literally the people who practice the most end up winning. That's how it works. There might be a fluke team every now and again that capitalize on another one's mistakes, but the consistency comes from hard practice. And it's absurd, but it's consistent across all different types of fields. Outside of innovation, whenever it comes to duplication, practice is where it's basically at. You have to set the habit and instill yourself with the correct routine whenever it comes to basically practicing. Something that you non-negotiate, whether it's personal development, making sure that you listen to the correct people every single day, listening to your mentorship and talk to them every single night or whenever you can, and making sure that you practice the actions that you're doing in play. I think that if you run a business team, right, there's obviously going to be communications that you need to have, speeches that you need to give, people that you need to motivate. Whatever you practice in private is how you perform in execution. There's an interesting saying that I talked about, how it's like people never rise to the occasion. Whenever adversity comes, there's a saying that people think that you rise to the occasion, but the truth is you fall back to your practice, which is so true, because every application that you do is a result of whatever habits that you've instilled and how you basically can implement them into the real world situations. So however it is that you practice, that is the true stage at which you push your limits. Because whenever you're in adversities, whenever you're in opportunities where you need to think on your feet, you don't actually develop new stuff, you just fall back to what you know. And it might be surprised what you pull from, but that's the reality of how humans work. So making sure that you instill your habits, you want to know the superpower? It's habits. Forming the right ones, and eventually you'll become successful. In whatever industry that you're looking towards, dominating, moving into, it doesn't matter. You instill yourself with the right habits, it's just a matter of time before you become successful. Now, it's not easy. It definitely isn't easy. But once they're set up, it is. That's the fact. It creates a new lifestyle. Eventually, you don't have to think about it, just like how you have to eat every day. if these habits are basically as automatic as that, success is just around the corner. Anyways, guys, I'm Chrison. Thanks for watching the video. Take out a couple of the other videos that we have on the channel and keep making sure you're putting and striving towards success. I'll see you in the next video.